Writing from the soul is the mother of all invention, and 21 Grams is back for another season of this exploration. We will look into the artist and the art they create. Except, this season we're adding the questionnaire, invented by the great Bernard Pivot, to go even deeper. They say 21 grams is the weight of the soul, and this show is the scale. So now here's your host for 21 grams, Joe Compton. Hello everybody, welcome to 21 grams. Yes, I am your host, Joe Compton, and look, I got awesome SG Tasz with me today.
Hi.
Look at that. I'm super excited.
Sorry, I'm sharing this.
Yeah, no problem. I always mention that I mean to change the direction of us before we start, and I always forget, and because on the graphic I'm on your side and you're on my side, so
I guess so. Like, if I'm,
it's kind of weird.
That is weird.
Never do it. And now I'm just gonna roll with it. Hi, Anita. Nice to see you.
Hello.
So now it's just a running joke, but I always love to start the show by asking you to kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself. So tell everybody, because you've been on a lot of shows lately for us, so a lot of people already know you, but tell everybody a little bit of something that we might not know about you.
Oh gosh, this is like at work where it's like, oh, tell us one interesting thing about yourself. I don't know. I never know how to answer that question. Well, I mean, the stuff you already do know is I write urban fantasy. It's usually more on the darker side, kind of mixed with horror, mystery, thriller, that kind of thing. And a little bit of romance too, and a little bit of humor. But it always has magic in it. And it's always set in Las Vegas. All my published stuff is set in Las Vegas, and a lot of my unpublished stuff as well. And that's because, maybe this will suffice for something people don't know about me, is I grew up in Minnesota. But when we were living there, it was me, my parents, and my little sister. We didn't have a lot of extended family. They were already out in Las Vegas. My dad's brother and sister lived out here. So the first time I was on a plane, I was, I think, maybe 11 months old, and it was out to Las Vegas because my parents needed a break and they needed a babysitter. And they say that the only person they could find was my aunt. So they flew out to Vegas so they could have a night to themselves for the first time in almost a year. And so my first trip here was, under 1 year old, and kept coming back year after year, and just sort of have been in love with Las Vegas ever since. So I don't gamble. I have no luck. It doesn't work for me. So I don't bother. I just like I just like the city. I like the feel of it. And I think that comes through in the two books I've published so far that are set in Las Vegas itself.
I want to talk about you a lot here, but I just have to interject something about me that hardly anybody knows really in this circle. So I grew up in Los Angeles area. And so the only place my dad ever wanted to go on vacation was Las Vegas. So I spent a lot of my youth in the arcades at Las Vegas. So I went to Vegas from age 4 to age 19, 18, because I left, 17 probably, twice a year at least to Vegas.
Wow.
And then my dad discovered Laughlin. And then changed from Vegas to Laughlin. But other than that, but yeah. So I was to Vegas quite a bit in my youth. So,
and was that before? Not to like age you or anything here, but was that before they had the law about like anyone under 21 couldn't be near the slot machines? Because I'm going to age myself here. I distinctly remember like sitting on my parents' lap and being able to push the buttons when I was a kid. And they do not let you do that anymore at all.
Yeah, it was way before that. They were allowed to smoke in casinos. Well, I think
you still can.
Yeah,
There's like one where you can't, but yeah, you can still smoke in casinos.
Yeah,
all of them.
But yeah, it's Yeah, we would basically. My dad would be so. Speaking of gambling, my dad would just go to the poker table. My mom would give me and my little brother like $40 to play in the arcade. We would use that pretty fast, and then go searching for them. And we wouldn't see my dad for 2 days because he was at the poker table that entire time. But yeah, so I'm very familiar with casinos. Like, I mean, I know all the old school ones that don't exist anymore, like Dunes and Sahara and places like that. So
Fun fact, Sahara was imploded and torn down and briefly became something else, and it is now the Sahara again. So there
nice.
is actually a Sahara in the spot where the Sahara used to be today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of history, you mentioned off air that this is your 5th anniversary of your first series, the Mall series, the Death Mall
The
series.
Dead Mall series. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious to kind of get the conversation started with you about how, when you look back at that, because you're promoting that aspect of it, what is different about you then, that as a writer, that you now, the writer you are now, from when, what was different about you then from the writer you are now?
Well, I mean, in the intervening 5 years, I somehow have aged 750 years. So I don't know how that happened, but I'm a lot more tired. I also had a kid, so that probably added, and also that whole 2020 thing that happened.
Yeah.
But as far as being a writer, I would say, this means I have to go back and like really think about where I was back then, which is probably a good thing for me to do at the start of this anniversary week of mine. So thank you. Back then, so prior to publishing the first books, I had been trying to go traditional route with a novel that I have been not really where it's one of those drawer things that like I wrote and thought that like this was going to be a big breakout debut, and 5 years later it's still sitting in a drawer. I've pulled concepts from it for misadventure and things, but it itself has not gone anywhere and may never go anywhere. So back then I was really just very impatient, even more so than I am now. I think between publishing and seeing how long things take, really do take. They take, even in independent publishing, it takes a while to get your platform underneath you, to build momentum for a book, unless you are someone who just really knows the social media algorithms and gets very lucky, or you're just very skilled. I'm not sure. To me, it looks like magic, but there's probably a lot of skill and knowledge that goes into making that work for you. And then, so between just having exposure to the industry, real exposure, and then combined with having, a very young child, I've just become a much more patient person. There are definitely still times when I get frustrated that things aren't moving fast enough, but it's a lot easier to be able to say, like, this is a long game, and, you're not going to have a successful series right away. It's just like building things piece by piece over days and weeks and months.
I mean,
did not understand back then at all.
I'm looking at 7 books in this series, and I'm curious, because they usually say that there's that convention that you're not really a writer until you've written 1,000,000 words, or you're not an author until you published a few books, and I'm thinking to myself about the 7 books below us here, and looking at those, and do you feel like you were finding, where in this series did you feel like you were really finding your footing for it?
Well, the first 3 barely count because they were adapted from fan fiction. There was 2 installments of Army of Darkness fan fiction, which I think I've talked about before, that became 3 books. The fourth one, as I wrote it, the fourth one is actually the prequel. So I think we're missing book 2 on that list. There's 8 in the series, but it doesn't matter. So the last one that you guys see in Original Sin, that was the fourth one I wrote. And that came out actually the same year. So it'll be having a 5th anniversary later this year. And then it was pandemic time. So things took a turn at that point, and book 4 gets significantly darker with some of the stuff that happens in the main character's life. And then I would say, so book 4 was kind of me just working out what I could during the pandemic. Because, so let me sort of back up here. The pandemic was 2020, as we all know. Don't need to remind you of that, I suppose. But it also happened to be around this time of year where everything shut down. Vegas shut down, I'll never forget, like the day before St. Patrick's Day, which happens to be the anniversary of, it would have been the 1-year anniversary. And I'd had plans to do events and things. And it all just fell apart. And so I took that pretty badly. I mean, everything that was happening was garbage, but like on top of it, I was like, this was a milestone. This meant a lot to me. And to have everything collapse on that day for me personally was extremely difficult. And also feeling like, and knowing that I couldn't really express how much I was hurt by that, because everything was so big and everyone was going through stuff. So that is where the fourth book came from. It was just trauma, I think. And knowing that, like, I'm going to put this book out there and nobody's going to read it because everyone's on, their minds are on other things. I think it was around the 5th book that I finally was like in a place where I had the knowledge and the emotional capacity and the time to write a book, probably. And it also happened to be right around the time where I was like, well, this series is, it was my starter series, and it makes sense now that I look back, but it is very hard to promote a series 5 books in that nobody's heard of. So by the time the 5th book was coming out, I was like, I gotta, I love this series. I love writing it. I love the characters. I'm glad I did this, but I think I need to wrap this up. Because if I keep going with it, I'm never going to get anywhere, because, I can't just keep pushing a book that came out 3, 4, however many years ago. And just have this only one thing. So it was around the time I was finishing book 5 that I realized I'm going to need to be done. So I wrote 6 and 7 during NaNoWriMo in 2021, drafted them real quick and wrapped it up to a point where I was like, I'm happy with this. And that was it. But I never would have been able to do that and know that it was time to wrap up at least this part of the series. Of course, I left, vignettes and availability for spinoffs and other things if I wanted to, and I might, if there's a desire for more stories in that universe. But yeah, that's where I think, like, when I made the decision of like, if I'm going to be serious about this and I am going to make money and make this a career, I need to move on from what what's in my heart, and I need to find something new to put in my heart, a new adventure. And I had to make that decision, and it was really hard at the time, but I think it was the right one. And I am very happy with how things wrapped up.
So that's when Misadventure was born?
Yeah, more or less. I forget how and when Misadventure, the idea came. I mean, the other thing is I moved to Vegas to write about Vegas, and Halcyon is it's set in Nevada, but it's a holdover from when I wasn't living here and didn't really know as much as I know now. So that was another reason to end the series where I did. And yeah, Misadventure came from there. I knew she was going to be set in Vegas. I knew I wanted to do something with being able to walk around Las Vegas without being seen, because that was a concept I'd come up with years and years and years ago. I think it was like 12 years ago. I thought of, a story, something along those lines, and what would you do, and how would how would it function, and what could you get away with, and things like that, and the sort of things you would see and stuff. And then everything spawned from that idea. So
yeah, people probably don't realize how difficult it is to not be seen when you're in Vegas, especially around the Strip and the areas that are most populated, obviously. But
it's heavily surveilled and monitored, and yeah, you can't get away with anything. Going back to the thing about kids in a casino, my son was born September 21, and a couple weeks later, literally like 2 or 3 weeks later, my friend was in town visiting. She was staying at the Cosmo, and she invited us over, and of course we took the kid, because in a weird twist of fate, I am now in Vegas with no family around me, much like my parents were in Minnesota with no family around them. So it's hilarious. But I just love how things work out that way. Poetically. And we were visiting her in the Cosmo, and the kid, is a potato. He's asleep, I'm pretty sure. The stroller's all folded up. He can't see anything. We were standing like in a lane far away while my friend and her friends were at a roulette table, just like throwing a couple of bucks down. We were waiting for them. We weren't gambling. And we still had someone come up to us and be like, you can't sit here. You have a child. We can't have that. You need to move along. It's like they watch you constantly. They know everything that's going on. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. But it is also why, people feel safe in those environments too. So, somewhat anyway.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, so is there a Dead Mall teleplay or screenplay out there?
No, not yet. I've heard a lot of people, and I feel like this is cheesy to say, but a lot of people have actually told me this sounds like, a great pilot or TV show or something like that. I would love to write one. Just haven't, I don't have any connection. So it's sort of like, until I have a, outlet for it, I have so many other things I'm working on. Like, I don't want to push time into it unless I feel like it's going to go somewhere, or at least, I'll get a no. I don't want to just do it and have it sit there. I'd rather give it to someone and have them say, nah, than nothing at all.
Yeah, no, I get you. It's a funny thing when people find out you've written screenplays, or you write movies or something to that effect, or you want to do that, or however it comes across. It's a funny thing, because then people start to equate everything you do with that, right? And then so it's like I wrote novels for a little bit, and it's like, okay, so when's the movie coming out? This is like, it's like that's the first thing people ask me, and it's like, look, I wrote it as a novel because actually, it's kind of funny, because the first book I wrote was a screenplay originally, but it was so vague that people were like, you should just write it as a novel. It would make a lot more sense, because you could be so much more, you could do so much more vividness with it. And I thought, well, that's kind of ass backwards, but okay. So I did it, and they would turn out to be right. But that was the thing, is like, people don't understand. I think it really comes from people who don't understand writing, and that is that writing a novel is an exercise in itself. It is something you do that your brain does differently than a screenplay does in a lot of respects. I mean, there are similarities. There's, obviously writing tools that you utilize, but they're totally different disciplines. And for me, it's like, if I wrote the book, I don't want to ever write the screenplay of it, because I wrote the book. I exhausted everything out of my brain, about it. I'm happy to sell it to somebody to write it, and that's fine with me. But I'm not. I won't ever write a. I won't ever write a movie about my book. I think if it's going to be one or the other for me. That's how I always looked at it.
Yeah, I think I as much as like the idea of writing the screenplays of anything I've written seems like fun. It just feels like at this point I'm probably too close to it. I would want to make it very specific and give lots of stage directions, and I know that they don't want that. So like half of it would have to be like cut anyway. So probably best if someone else at least does the final draft of it.
What I am curious though, what would you say your screenplay writing? Do you feel like your screenplay writing has helped your novel writing in a lot of respects? Do you feel like there is some kismet there, and that you might have a leg up because you can see things a little bit more clearly and know how to kind of say that to people?
Um, So I think it goes both ways. So I don't know if everyone knows this, but I have a background in screenwriting, play script writing, and actually video production.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where all of that comes from. I would say in the beginning, it actually hurt me. The first drafts of Dead Mall and some of the other stuff I was writing was like extremely dialogue heavy and had absolutely no world building in it. It was bare bones kind of narrative, and it was all character interaction. And I had to kind of unlearn that and add more inner monologue. Like there was no inner monologue at all for any of the characters. And even I would say in early, like the first book or two of Dead Mall, there's very minimal inner monologue as well. And over time, you get more and more. So I had to unlearn that. I think where it helps me is my dialogue is it's one of the things I get a lot of compliments on in my writing, just because, that's where I came from, is dialogue, heavy dialogue work. And it does help me when I'm writing action scenes too, because I can visualize like, okay, if he's there, and it's rare that I get completely lost in what the characters are doing. Now I've kind of gone the other way, where I might be getting too specific about the movements people are making, and I have to be like, okay, well, I don't really need to say all of this stuff. Pull it back. So I think that's how it's affected it. It's been pluses and minuses, and it has been finding a balance in it.
I mean, from Dead Mall to Misadventure, it seems to me that you made a conscious shift to be more. I mean, obviously, there's probably a lot of great characters in Dead Mall, and you follow a group of them, and what have you. But it seems like you made a conscious shift to really concentrate on one character and give one character a huge arc. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I did. That was extremely important to me with this one. I knew that going into this, it was going to be a first-person book. There was never any question as to whether or not it was going to be, multiple POVs, or if it was going to be first-person from different points of view or anything. I knew I was going to stick with Adina, the titular misadventure, throughout the entire book. And I think that was a good choice, because the story is so personal to her. And in book 2, it gets even more so. So I think that was the right call for this story.
Do you find in doing that you had to share a little bit more of yourself with the character than you normally would have if you had an ensemble?
100%. And I think that is another way that I've changed over the last 5 years is with Dead Mall. It's a kind of a YA story, since it's 16-year-old main characters, but also not really.
Yeah.
But that third person, so I was writing that 16-year-old girl and boy when I was in my 30s. So there was a distance there. The third person creates another distance. Being able to jump around heads creates another distance. Although it also gives me an opportunity to explore different facets of my own personality. But I never had to jump too deep into anybody. Carrie and Grace were probably the closest. With John, too, a little bit in the prequel, which, if you haven't read the book, means nothing to you. But still in all, that's true. With Misadventure, that is a much more personal story. She's closer to my age. She has a similar kind of family situation to me. My parents are together. My dad did not disappear and leave me when I was 3, but she has a sister. She has a mom who's kind of similar to my mom a little bit. The sister is not. The sister is very different from my sister. But and yeah, I think she shares a lot of foibles of mine as well. That's true in the first book, and in the second book, which comes out in 4 weeks tomorrow, by the way. That's I found myself pulling heavily from not only my own personality, but situations I've been in my life. Believe it or not, given the fantastic nature of the book, there's because she still has, she's got this magic that she does and this separate plane she goes to, but she also is dealing with real relationships with her sister, with her mom, and in book 2 with the love interest that she's dealing with.
And you mentioned that you wanted to write something that kind of encompassed where you were now in Vegas and kind of giving a little bit more exploration of the city that you now know a little bit more intimately. Do you feel like that also has helped you blend, a little bit more of a personal tint to it?
Yes. And it's one of my proudest points of this series is I was at an event last November and I had another Vegas local come up to me and say that I may have already said this on something here, but she said that, she reads any book that's set in Vegas and nobody seems to get it right. And mine got it right. So that was probably one of the, and I would also like to point out that I don't use any real locations in the book. It's all just, atmosphere and just living here. It's not about and I do tend to agree with her. Like a lot of people, when they write Vegas, they're looking at oh, here's where, this is the hotel and this is what it looks like. And this is what I kind of think of when I think of Vegas. But and I was that way because the first novel I wrote was set in Vegas when I wasn't living here. And I've gone back and read it recently and I'm like, that's wrong. That doesn't make any sense. That's ridiculous. Nobody would ever do that or say that or drive that way or, all the stuff that you don't know unless you're here day in and day out and you're able to kind of get a real sense of the atmosphere 24/7. Because it's not what people see on vacation at all.
Yeah, there is a world in Vegas outside of the Strip for sure.
Amazingly, yeah.
I mean, you could just go to Hoover Dam and you would be amazed by how different Vegas is, right? So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite places to go is the Springs Preserve, which is out on the west side of town, which is where I live, out west. And it's still in the, kind of middle-ish between the Strip and the mountains. But it's got a botanical garden. It's got just flowers everywhere. It's got a butterfly habitat. It's beautiful. And I feel like people don't know it's there.
Probably you don't want people to know it's there though a little bit. That's the other thing about Vegas and people who live here. They love their little secrets. I mean, there's plenty of secrets in the desert, but there is also plenty of secrets amongst the town.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And that is kind of something that I didn't know until I lived here, because
Yeah.
before I lived here, I was like, when I would come on vacation and I would find something cool, I would tell everybody about it. And now when I find something cool, I'm like, oh God, if everyone, like, this place is gonna be ruined. I can't tell anybody, or they'll all come here.
Damn Raiders fans.
Yeah.
Go back home.
Go back to Oakland. No, don't even get me started on the new baseball stadium. I can't talk about it.
So, I mean, you're running through this series now. So, how many books do you have planned for Misadventure? Do you have a end goal in mind, or are you just kind of leaving it open? You kind of going with the flow, or do you have a set in mind?
So I've gone back and forth,
Hmm.
because it's always been, even with Dead Mall and now with Misadventure, it's been my goal to have a series that people will love and I can keep writing it, and tell, lots of adventures. But like Dead Mall, and this goes to show you that I don't have everything figured out yet. I made the decision, not mistake, choice, to have an overarching plot in
Mm,
in the first book, and it continues on, and there is, like a full series arc. And once you make that choice, I don't think that it is a good idea to continue the series after it's over,
mm.
because
So it's a real strong arc then.
yeah, I mean, it's going to be, there's
World
going to be a
change.
place where the story that anyone cares about is going to end.
Yeah, gotcha.
Um,
You don't
and
want to jump the shark, basically.
no, I mean, I look back at, one of my favorite examples of this is Supernatural, the show.
Hmm.
I watched it through season about 9 or 10, but that
Mm,
show ended at season 5. That's
mm,
where it should have stopped. It had a great ending. It was, entertaining, and, that was good.
mm.
But then it just kept going. And I know people love that show, and I know they love later episodes and stuff. So there is, like, people that will keep watching it just because they like
Yeah.
whatever it decides to do. TV is a little bit different because you've got the actors and stuff, with their own sort of, appeal. Um, but I don't have any desire to do that. So when it comes to Misadventure, I've decided to cap it at 10 books. That is where I'm going to end. Um, I've also changed my plan a little bit. I was going to release 2 books a year until the series was done, but I
Mhm.
think I'm going to extend it a little bit, because I'm going to introduce another series that I've actually written one short story for.
Mm,
And that one is going to be kind of a standalone series
mm.
where I can just keep writing books that don't, and there's not an overarching plot involved.
How much of that arc involves the magic system that you've created for this series, and how much discipline have you invoked so far with that?
It involves it heavily, and not nearly enough, because I'm a discovery writer. So, and this was true for Dead Mall too.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of find out things about the world as I write.
Hmm.
I have a basic sort of, I know these few things to be true, and everything else kind of I build on top of it.
Hmm.
Um, and the magic system in this book, I think, lends itself pretty well to that, because there's not a lot of things that are prevented by the magic system.
Mm.
There's the 6 main disciplines in the book, which I'm not going to list here because I always forget one and it's always different, and I'll embarrass myself.
No
Um,
worries. I'm not asking you to do that, so don't worry about it.
um, so each magic user has this operation.
Mhm.
It's theirs. Other people can have similar ones. There can be groups of people that have the same kind of thing, but it's like, so Adina, for example, She can death walk. She can enter the death plane and walk around as an incorporeal ghost. Essentially, there are rules involved in how she can do that. And she can only ever do that. That's her magic. It's not like Hogwarts magic, where it's like if you learn the spell, you can do all the things. That is what she does. That's how the magic works in this world. Now, things can be combined. You can have lots of, different opportunities to have lots of different operations, but pretty much like 99% of the time, it's only ever going to be one thing that you can do. So I know that. And then as I come across stories, I'm like, well, wouldn't it be cool if someone could do this? And then I kind of look through, it's like, is that possible? Does it make sense? And then it's like, yep, they can do that.
So there is a thought. There's a thought.
Yeah. No. I'm not just winging it. Yeah. There are rules and there are, things that absolutely can't be done. Like Adina cannot, suddenly be doing time magic. She can't suddenly time travel like some other people can. She can't see the future like some people can. And she never will. So.
And I gather, I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning to. But I gather Adina doesn't necessarily get along with those people as well as she might want to if she needs that magic. Is that she's kind of a lone wolf in a lot of respects?
She starts off that way, definitely.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, leave it there. We won't go into spoilers. I am curious too, the discipline of urban fantasy for you, and because you said that authenticity and making Vegas very prominent to those who know Vegas is very important with this series, or at least it's important to catch for a readership. It sounds like that's where you've kind of found a niche, is people in Vegas really relate to this because it's their city, it's what they know. Yep. So staying within those boundaries and rules, have you kind of danced that line a little bit, and do you feel like is that easier than the magic system discipline, or is it a little bit more difficult because you are, as you say, a discovery writer, so I'm sure you're exploring Vegas as much as you're exploring the magic?
Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's difficult because Vegas is sort of magical in its way. Yeah. So I'm able to pull that out very, that's what I want to do, is kind of show Vegas as a magical sort of place, which most people would probably laugh at, but that's what I've always seen in it. But I haven't really struggled with that too much.
Vegas is not as big as people think it is either. So
it isn't. It is both bigger and smaller somehow.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the boundary. It is a very small area.
Yeah,
big city wise, but it's very dense. There's a lot of stuff in it.
Right. Are you exploring outside of Vegas, like Henderson and like suburbs like that outside of Vegas? Or are you staying strictly into the central Vegas?
So for the first book, it's just Vegas. There's a little bit on the Strip. There's a little bit South Strip. I mean, they go out a little bit to the Summit, which is the secret headquarters, which is south of Henderson, which, if you know the area, is like nothing out there.
Yeah.
Which is why it's there.
Yeah.
So do that. There's a little bit in like the downtown area, a little bit of like a seedy motel kind of thing and a club. There's a little bit of like corporate Vegas. And then there's a lot of time spent in just domestic where she lives as well. So, which I think is something people probably don't think about. And then the second book, you get further out into the desert, hence the title, Death in the Desert. And you explore another type of magician, which is...
For Deathwalkers, that's got to be fun. The desert has a lot of secrets.
Oh yes. It's all about, so that one, I'll tell you this. the order magicians, the operators, they're pretty, sort of academic about how they approach their magic. In the second book, Adina has to confront a sort of lineage-based group of magicians who are able to shapeshift. So it's a lot about illusion and things not being what they seem, which is very true of being out in the desert. And then the third book, which I'm working on now, is actually kind of like I guess you'd call it a road book because they go to London. So it's in a completely different place, which is very challenging since I don't have enough money to travel to London right now. And I still want to have that like sense of place. So that has been fun to try to get around. I'm sort of like, maybe I'll try to go to London on the cheap, if that is even a thing you can do. Just like go for 2 days and not sleep at all and just like do my research real fast. But we'll see.
Yeah, get like a red eye, and then do a like a hostel or something, right?
Yeah, and just like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to see? Like, just I know it's not going to have the same sort of like depth of atmosphere as the rest of my series, but that's also kind of part of what I'm working into that book too.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we live in an age now where you can go on YouTube and basically tour the city in the most boring of fashions, but you can do it, right? So you get an idea of at least of like structure and what's there and not there. And
I've spent a lot of time on Google Maps already. A lot of satellite view of the Tower of London so far.
Any thought about traveling to Minnesota and exploring another world that you know quite well?
This is not the first time that question has been asked, but no, I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought yet. And I don't know why, because it is a really fascinating place, but I spent so many years there.
Yeah.
I grew up in Minnesota. I lived in the same house my whole life. I went to college in up near Green Bay. Go Packers. And then I lived in Madison for, I think it was 8 years after that. Then back to Minnesota for like 4 years. And now I'm here. I did a lot of writing in Minnesota. And some of it was based there. And some of it was, I can't wait to leave. So maybe it's a question of just like, maybe I haven't been gone long enough. And maybe at some point, something will strike me that I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to write that.
Well,
but
the only
as
reason
this moment, no plans for that.
The only reason I brought it up is because it's such a different atmosphere. The winters are hard and the summers are even harder there, which people don't realize. I mean, summers are really difficult in Vegas, but there is probably something that people don't know about Las Vegas is it gets cold there as much as it gets hot there. So, but it doesn't necessarily snow like it snows in the Midwest.
No, nowhere close. I mean, I have not been here for like a real Vegas snow. I can barely
which never touches the ground. Basically, it evaporates as soon as it hits the concrete.
Well, so I think it was either, I can't remember if it was the year before or the month before, which is very different, before I moved here. But at one of those increments, they had like an inch of snow on the ground that stuck. I think it was a month before I moved. And the city like shut down. Yeah. And it's not because they're weak.
No.
Totally.
Just you don't know how to people just don't know how to deal with it. It's
because they don't have snow plows too.
Yeah.
Like they don't have
salt roads.
Yeah, they literally don't have the things they need to move the snow off the ground so people can drive safely on it. Like, and they don't have the same kind of like gutters that they have in the Midwest. It's a whole thing. So
and they don't know what happens when it turns to ice. They don't know how to deal with that. Things like that.
I wouldn't be going out. I would be staying home until that was fixed because I know how to drive on it only because I'm from the Midwest, but nobody else does.
Yeah.
also the best way to drive on it is not to drive on it, even if you're in the
Yeah.
Midwest. Stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that was the only reason I brought it up. I'm sorry it brought up a
Oh,
subject.
no, not at all. No, I do feel like I should do something back there at some point, and I have had ideas about it in the past. Thoughts about because I do a weekly series on monsters, which I call Monster
Mhm.
of the Week,
Yeah.
which is a phrase in the public domain, even though it's also an RPG game that is way more well known than anything I'm doing. But a number of them do come from the Midwest, and there's some fascinating cryptids and lore up there. Just
Yeah.
nothing that struck me as something that I really have to write about yet. Anyway.
Yeah. It's funny you brought that up because that's the last place I wanted to walk in with this, talking to you about, and that's kind of one of the key subjects about this show that we've been really exploring is genre and the fascination that the blending of genres and genre itself is kind of becoming passe in a lot of respects, that readership doesn't care about it as much as people want them to. There are some genres that readerships are very heavily involved in, but urban fantasy is one of those that you can kind of do different genre hopping with. You and is that kind of what appealed to you in that respect for doing urban fantasy? I mean, obviously, it sounds like more like Vegas was the reason you did more like urban fantasy, but I mean, the genre aspect of it, how do you approach that, and is there something are you trying to walk some lines there?
Um, so I've been drawn, well, yeah, partially it was Las Vegas. But I've always liked the idea of magic among us.
Mm,
You just can't see it.
mm-hmm,
Which is why I don't really write future or historical,
mm-hmm,
um, or just straight fantasy. I've
mm,
tried, and it's just not as interesting to me as being able to be like, oh, there's magic around that corner, literally right now. That's what I find interesting.
nice.
Um, and certainly as I've progressed in the genre, the opportunity that the readers allow me to explore other genres is extremely compelling, because I'm I guess what the kids are calling a mood reader. I read a lot of different stuff as I
Mm,
feel like it.
sure.
Um, so I write kind of the same way. Um, so like for example, Misadventure is the first one is very much just urban fantasy, supernatural mystery with some romance in it.
Mm-hmm,
The second one is more, thriller shifter kind of stuff, and the third one you get some elements of kind of gas lamp sort of, you know,
nice.
Londony kind of
Well, yeah,
stuff.
London. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because well, I don't want to give it away. Well, I guess I've already given it away. But basically, they're called in to investigate a series of killings that are mirroring Jack the Ripper. Um, Copycat, but of course, it's not
uh,
that straightforward,
yeah.
because the killings are mirroring it, but nobody has witnessed anything. And London is one of the most heavily surveilled places in the world, so they're thinking that it might be someone like Adina, who is the only one of her. So that's what that is. So yeah, I like that I don't have to stick necessarily to exactly what one genre expects
Sure.
of me. It's why I could probably, especially, never write anything truly historical, like straight history, or like straight historical fiction with no magic or no interpretation. I just,
Mm,
that audience, whatever you're writing, they're so specific and they want those details and they want it exactly right. And I just have no patience for that. I am a great admirer of anyone who does. I read some of that stuff. I
mm-hmm,
love it. I could never write it.
mm. Were your plays and screenplays in a specific genre, or do you feel like you were all over just mood writing those as well?
What were my screenplays? It's been so long. Um, Well, the last one I wrote was just comedy, and that was that. So I also produced and like actually made that one with a co-producer and a group of people back in Madison, Wisconsin, the film capital of the world. So that was very easy to do. Very easy. Everyone was on board with it. What made it, where we really shot ourselves in the foot was we based it about two women who were making an independent adult film. So again, in Wisconsin, everyone super loved that idea. No regrets. It was a really good time. But so that was just from like a logistics standpoint. It's like I can't shoot. I don't have the money. We had like $5,000 to shoot the whole thing, 6 full-length episodes, and it was micro budget. We didn't have the money to do anything really fantastical, so we just used what we had, and that's pretty much been my whole film career, is just writing for what I was able to do.
Really. I can relate. Awesome. All right, you ready to do the questionnaire?
Yeah, I have no idea what it is.
No problem. So we're about to do Le Questionnaire, invented by the great Bernard Pivot, then perfected by the awesome James Lipton for Inside the Actor Studio. I didn't take it for my purposes where I destroyed it, just so that I can torture my guests. So, Sarah, what is your favorite word to write?
Ooh. Like physically write?
Yeah.
Like that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be the notion of writing, but a word that you like to use, or you notice that you like, that you want to get into something. Like for example, mine is flabbergasted. I love flabbergasted. I use flabbergasted all the time. So.
Of course, nothing's coming to mind. The first thing I thought of was frivolity, just because of all the loops and stuff.
Nice. Yeah, that's one. Okay, so then what's your least favorite word to write?
Ow. All was the first one that came to mind, so I'm going to go with that. I think it's just boring. Like, there's no way to make that fun. It's just very utilitarian.
All right. So what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I mean, I feel like a broken record, but it is walking around the town I live in, Las Vegas. Nice. Yeah. I used to come here for writing, just creative writing retreats for myself. I wouldn't do anything else but just eat, sleep, and write. Nice. I got a lot of weird looks.
I bet. What turns you off?
Having to sell it afterwards. Actually not having to sell it. I actually love talking to people about books. Having to try to explain it without making myself sound like an idiot, because I will just spin and spin, and it's not good.
Nice. All right. So everybody's favorite question: what is your favorite curse word?
I'm gonna go basic and just go shit.
What sound or noise do you love?
Especially after moving to the desert, the sound of rain, because it's so rare.
Nice. What sound or noise do you dislike?
When someone is parked at a red light and then it turns green and then they don't even wait and they just go really fast away, and their car just like does that really loud like grinding noise, and then there's another red light and they have to stop again, so I know it's going to happen again.
Wow, you even like doubled down on that.
It happens a lot here.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, there's a lot of stoplights in Vegas. So,
Yep.
What character of yours would put their face on the currency of their world?
Oh man, I don't know that I have anyone that's that arrogant. Oh, there is one. In Death by Misadventure, the Memory Master, Eidolon Hate, he sucks. That guy's an asshole. Him. He for sure would do it.
What artistry would you love to try that you haven't yet?
I was just talking about how I want to get into like welding, ironworking. That's what I would like to try.
That's been a popular answer here.
Something in the air, apparently. I can't knit, so I have nothing like this. I need something bigger.
Okay. What artistry would you never try?
Knitting.
Yeah. I was going to say, you probably just answered the question, but
yeah, no. I have no patience for that.
All right. So if heaven exists or whatever you believe beyond exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive?
Surprise.
Well, this has not been a surprise. I knew this would be a lot of fun. And it was. You're a fantastic guest. You're always great to talk to. And this was a really great conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do so and to talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I really appreciate that so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always like coming on This Week in Indies, and I'm glad that we've gotten a chance to talk just you and me.
Yeah. So tell everybody where they can find these wonderful books of yours.
Yeah, so my website, sgtosh.com, has all my stuff. It's got all my links to my books. It's got my blog. Like I said, I do a weekly monster blog, which is very fun. It's got my social media, which is right now Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok more and more, but still pretty light on that. And you can sign up for my newsletter there. So that is where you can find everything about me, is my website. And all my books are on Amazon and in Kindle Unlimited.
Awesome. Well, everybody, we are wrapping up the season. We're almost through. We've got a couple more episodes to go, so come back and join us again for those. Thanks, everybody, for being here on 21 Grams. And remember that it's always time to go indie now. We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.